Notion has over 30 million active users, and in their last funding round, they were valued at $10 billion. But what is Notion? And why does it seem like everyone has their own definition? And absolutely none of them make any sense. How can a company that is so hard to explain be worth $10 billion? Let's find out. So Notion is actually a rare phenomenon where it is quite complex to explain because it does so many things. But despite that, it has actually picked up a lot of traction and really a lot of people have been using it. Usually the simpler your message is, the more easily you can explain it to other people, the more it lends itself to word of mouth. Not in the case of Notion. Notion just does so many things. There's no clear definition and it varies based on who the actual user is, what they'll actually use Notion for. So despite that, it's still been growing like crazy. In the last couple of years, it's actually had pretty exponential growth. And so here's what I actually tell people when they ask me, and you'll notice these little toggle things. This is because I'm using Notion. I'm actually screen recording a Notion doc right now. So that's why you see these cool features here. So I can toggle in and out. That's an aside. But anyway, when someone asks me what is Notion, here's what I tell them. My first definition is imagine Excel and Word combined. Imagine like you have an Excel sheet and all the functionality of an Excel sheet where you can kind of link to other cells and put formulas and kind of connect one sheet to another sheet. Imagine that, but except every time you click on a cell, it's actually a Word doc. And usually people just look at me like, what are you talking about? That made no sense. They have this deer in the headlights look. So then I'll try to explain it in a different way, which I usually say, imagine Word meets Excel meets Asana, right? So these three productivity tools, these three like business tools combined into one, that's Notion. And usually like 90% of the time, they still don't get it. So then I'll say it's a no-code tool that allows you to build your own productivity systems for yourself or for your teams. And so at this point, usually people are just like nice enough to like stop asking, even though they still don't actually get it. And so what ends up happening is, like they don't really understand what Notion is. And usually ends up being like, hey, like I just have to show you. It's one of those things where like, you can't really explain, let me just show you. And so while these definitions may be good and they cover what I do with Notion, the problem is that these definitions don't actually cover all of what Notion does or is what it's capable of doing, right? It only covers what I do with it. So for example, while I use Notion primarily for project management, like we get a project, I then assign it to different members on the team, and then I can monitor the progress and then check in when everything's done and make sure that the client gets the project done. My counterpart, one of the people on our team, one of the partners, he actually was in med school. Now he's doing his residency, and he actually used Notion a lot for like studying, right? So he'd create a study system and he'd kind of take notes and stuff on Notion. That's something that I don't use Notion for. And at this point, it's probably starting to make sense why it's so difficult to explain what Notion is and why everyone has their own answer to what is Notion. And so now let's take a look at how Notion actually describes Notion. So I'm not going to actually pull up the website. I just took some notes here. So the first thing you'll see on the website is Notion is the connected workspace where better, faster work happens now with AI. Now, to be honest, I have no clue what that means. Got some buzzwords in there. But if we go through the landing page, we can get some answers here. So the messaging, you'll notice, is mainly focused on business users. You'll see this because the features that they highlight is wikis, docs, projects, and Notion. So you can make your company wiki on there. This is not relevant to a individual user. They're not making a wiki for themselves. You got docs, you can collaborate with others and make docs. Projects, you can manage your projects, and Notion AI. So those are the features that they talk about on the landing page. Then if we go to benefits, you'll see one of the things they talk about is cut costs. How this works is basically, how I mentioned that my definition is Excel meets Word meets Asana. So when you use all those things in one tool, you have one subscription service you're paying for rather than three different software subscriptions. Or in the case of Excel and Word and Asana, it's just be two. So one for Asana, one for Microsoft Office. So you can consolidate your costs by just putting everything into one bundle. So the next thing they talk about is building blocks. And so the way Notion actually works in a simplified way, I'm not a technical person, so I'm just going to give you my understanding of this, is that everything you do, everything in here is actually contained in a block, right? So like every time we hover over one of these things, you'll see these, 6 dots and this plus. The plus is for like a menu. You can quickly do things. We can cancel that. And then the 3 dots, or the 6 dots, is actually for moving that block, right? So what you can do here, let's say building blocks, we want to move to features. instead of benefits. So we literally just drag it over here and boom, it's there. And let's say we decide we actually want to keep it back where it was, we just drag it back here. And so in this way, every single element becomes drag and drop. Unlike, it's not just text that you can kind of highlight and drag and drop, but you can highlight blocks of text, which is super useful and it saves a lot of time. And it's not just text. You can do this with any other block. Anything that takes up space on the page, you can basically move it around and drag and drop however you want. The last two things I talk about in benefits are having everyone side by side, so collaboration, and then community, right? Like you can get the help you need whenever you need it. And then if you keep going on the landing page, the next section they have is other uses. So this is basically all the different uses you can use Notion. So I just took a picture here. So they have company wiki, product roadmap, OKRs, vacation planner, habit tracker, editorial calendar, meeting notes. So they're just kind of highlighting all the different functionalities you could use Notion for. And so if you actually keep scrolling down all the way to the bottom, what will actually happen is in the footer, they have a section here which actually says solutions, and then enterprise, small business, personal use, remote work, startups, education, nonprofits, engineering, product, design, managers. Yes, I did just read this whole picture here. And so what this is if you click on any one of these links here, it has a custom landing page for each of these avatars. So these are 11 main categories, and they have a custom landing page based on the benefits and features for that unique use case. And so like number one, that's a pretty cool thing to do. Landing page wise. So like, figure out who your ideal customers are and then make custom landing pages for each of them. But it also just shows the flexibility of Notion, right? So like if you're in nonprofits, you're going to see a completely different use case, and the features that you use in Notion are going to be different than if you're a small business or if you're an enterprise, or if you're a manager versus a designer, right? Or if you're in engineering versus in education, right? So it's super cool. And there's all these different variations and ways to use Notion. All right, so now let's talk about why I personally prefer Notion over other tools. And I suspect that the answers and the reasons I give are going to be pretty similar to what other people also have to say. I spend most of my day managing projects, and so it's super important for me to have the right project management system. One of the things that Notion allows me to do is really, for each project, I can create a system that works for that project, right? Like I can customize things to work the way I want that system to work. And so what I generally do for my projects is I'll create a master database that has basically like all the tasks, all the things that need to be done, and all the relevant information I keep in one database. And then from there, I'll create a dashboard, like a home page, a dashboard where I can quickly reference all the different things that I want to at any given time in that database. So instead of going to the database, I just have this home page, which has a bunch of different views of different aspects of that database. For example, for our design team, we have a master task database. And then we have on the home page, we have a bunch of different views. But two of the views that I use most frequently are we have a view of the timeline. So it'll show the deadline that we put in the database, and it'll show it in timeline view of like which projects are actually coming up like soon, which ones are in progress. You can quickly see right there in that view. And then under that, I have a view of a Kanban board of like who's assigned which tasks. And so I can quickly see like, okay, here are the tasks that need to get done by this time. And right under, I can see who has the bandwidth on my team to actually take those tasks. And from there, I can just take the task and assign it to people, just drag it to the person, and then it'll update the database on the back end without you having to like manage multiple different, you don't have to check things off in multiple places. It's all connected. Another super useful feature is you can connect Zapier or Make and set up your own automations to make sure that the metrics you want are coming in consistently without you having to like fill them in manually every week. Now, the next thing that I absolutely love about Notion is just how intuitive the word processing is and how intuitive like the shortcuts are. So I'll give you an example here, and I'm not a writer, so I'm not like using the word processing that much, but it's just super simple. So like basically I can hit enter, and then let's say I don't want a bullet point, right? So let's say there's no bullet point here and I want a bullet point. I can just hit this dash and space and it'll do an automatic bullet point. Whereas like honestly in Word, every time I have to find like where the little 1, 2, 3 is or the dot bullet points instead of like the dashes. Cause like in here, it defaults to this bullet point, right? And which is super nice. I really like that because these are the like bullet points are the most used. It's not the dashes. And so I think that's super helpful. Another thing that's really cool is like, if you just hit this backslash, this whole menu pops up of things you can do, right? So like one thing that I always forget to do, because my partners actually like to use emojis and like stuff like that a lot, in like headings especially, I always forget to put emojis in the heading. So like, for example, I can just go here, I put emoji here, and I'll just put a question mark. Boom, like literally I don't have to do anything else. It's that simple. Over here, let's say I want to add a to-do list instead, just write to, and it pops up. So that's one thing that I just find like super useful. We already talked about the block base where you can just move things around, drag and drop it, whatever you want. Now, from a usage perspective, these are the two elements, project management and word processing, that I really enjoy with Notion. Now, there's some other non-tangible things that come with using Notion. So for example, like I'm someone that really likes to build things. And so with Notion, number one, it makes it super easy to build things, right? Like there's no code required. I can just drag and drop however I want. I can just think about a process I want to simplify and just start dragging and dropping until I get something that looks nice. It's literally like just using Lego for business tools, right? Which is, by the way, that's going to be my new definition. But the other thing that happens is like after I built the tool, whatever it is, I have this feeling inside where I have to share it with someone, right? I have to go to a community, I have to go to a group chat and share it with people. And what that does is, number one, it gives me some social currency because I'm giving some value to that group by giving them a tool that's going to make their process easier or more streamlined in some way. Number two, makes me look cool because it showcases that I really thought about what it is that is going to simplify this process and I made it happen, right? And so by creating and sharing Notion templates, you're actually gaining social currency, which is just a masterclass on thinking about startup growth. So what about the people that aren't into building? Notion provides value to those people by streamlining their processes, right? So instead of having 3-4 tools, you have everything in one place. And so getting your work done is a lot easier and faster because everything is just right there. You don't have to juggle between like 6 to 8 different tabs, and it's all just right there. And the last intangible thing that you have with Notion is the community, right? Like wherever you are, Reddit, Discord, Facebook, like if you ever have a question about Notion, you can get your answers on the internet. Like people that are into Notion, they love to share that they're into Notion on these different platforms. So what having an active community does is actually two things. Number one, it actually creates more awareness for Notion, right? People are talking about it. You don't have to pay them money and they're spreading the word even more for you. And number two, it allows for users to provide value to other users. So you're not limited to just Notion providing value to the end user. Other people that are using Notion can start providing value to other Notion users. And so now that you know what Notion is and why people prefer Notion to other tools, I want to quickly walk you through a few examples in the real world of Notion in action. So these are the templates that we have created and we have in our marketplace. So you can see here, medical students, people doing research, people managing design teams, content creators. We actually have 4 different avatars that we have built products for. So as you already know, this entire video you've been watching so far, it's just been me screen recording Notion. I've just been toggling up and down the things I want to talk about. And so what's cool about this is that like I can screen record this and then this also becomes a shareable web page. So if you go here and share, publish, it actually has a link. So I'll include the link to this in the description just so you can take a look at it and you'll be able to kind of toggle yourself and take a look at things. And the last example is the alien encounter tracker. So in preparation for this video, one of the things we did is we sat down and we thought about what is an avatar or a use case that is not already on the Notion template gallery that could be one. I'm not saying you necessarily need a Notion template for this. And we're not alien enthusiasts ourselves, so we may have made some mistakes and it may not be as, the words may be wrong and it may be like tracking the wrong things. But what we wanted to show here is that if you actually put yourself in the mind of the end user, you can actually build tools for anyone. We actually made a video about this, walking through this template end to end. So check it out. The link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you say when people ask you, what is Notion?